what organizations really need to be thinking about is how do they relate to their workforce. And of course, we have multi-generations in a workforce. Some of our clients are very focused on associating with a brand. Some of them are focused on how do we give people the true experience that we want them to have. And a lot of them are thinking around how do we not only attract and retain talent, but ensure that we are maximizing the experience and the effectiveness of that talent. It's a concept of almost hyper personalization right now, where it's becoming a bit of a B2C model rather than just a B2B model.
Sue, welcome to the Future Work Podcast. Really excited to have you here today. Gosh, what a background. Basically, in my interpretation of everything you do and have done, you are an incredible strategist working on behalf of JLL, helping portfolio companies and clients of JLL to figure out what's next. So you're the perfect spokesperson for the future of work. We're really grateful to have you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Frank. I'm very flattered by my introduction, but I've been in the real estate industry for a number of years. I won't date myself yet, but very, very excited about what we can do with our clients and help them navigate the journey of the future of work. So thank you for having me here today.
We're grateful. And, as a strategist, we've both seen, well, we're not dating ourselves. It's apparent, at least on my part, that I've been around a while. So we've seen lots of transformation through the years, through the decades, 5 decades that I've been doing this in this particular industry. What's next? What do you think companies have to be thinking about today to be prepared for the future? Not just on a broad base, because that's too big a thing, but in their strategic thinking about how to manage their portfolios or how to manage their workforce relative to their portfolios.
Yeah, great question. And as you rightly so have said, we've gone through many, many different variations of what is the role of property around talent, talent attraction, people connections, all those things. I actually think right now what organizations really need to be thinking about is how do they relate to their workforce? And of course, we have multi generations
That's
in
a
a
key.
workforce.
The key.
Yeah. And it's how do they relate to that workforce. And some of our clients are very focused on associating with a brand. Some of them are focused on how do we give people the true experience that we want them to have. And a lot of them are thinking around how do we not only attract and retain talent, but ensure that we are maximizing the experience and the effectiveness of that talent. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit more, if that's okay, Frank. You talk about multi-generational workforce, you talk around disruption of AI, you talk around people relating to a brand. It's a concept of almost hyper personalization right now, where it's becoming a bit of a B2C model rather than just a
Yeah,
B2B model.
I agree. It's almost B to B, yes, B to C, but almost B to B to C.
Yeah.
No, it really is. The stepping of generations, the transformation of the services, real estate, and I've argued this for at least 3 decades. I've said it's not a facility or a physical industry, it's a service industry.
Yeah,
And people go, "Oh, no, it's, buildings and blah, blah, blah." I say, "Yeah, a building, but it's a real estate dependent service industry."
I
And
couldn't agree more. Yeah.
we've also been saying since 2015 or 16 that there are no occupiers anymore.
Yeah.
There are only travelers. And
Yeah.
you have to think of everyone as a traveler instead of an occupier because we all work in multiple locations in generally a single day or certainly in a single week.
Yeah.
And how to manage that transit is critically important to your point of living the brand
Mm. Yeah.
for companies. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Um, and I think on a generational basis, a question I'd like to explore is you've got a lot of boomers exiting the workforce,
Yeah.
uh, or I won't say a lot because a lot of them are choosing to stay.
Mm.
Our own longevity and technology and flexibility allow us to work as long as we like
Hmm.
in today's world. And you've also though got exiting millennials now.
Hmm.
Will that change how the workplace is focused in the future on the younger generations that are in and will occupy the workforce? Does that materially focus the strategies on flexibility? I know Randstad tells us that, um, uh, for the audience, Randstad is the largest employment management company in the world. That when they run an ad for a position and they include the word remote or flexible or anything to do with
Hmm.
flexibility in the workplace, they get a 5 to 1 response,
Hmm.
which means people that do that will ultimately win the war for talent. So
Yeah.
what's your view of the changes we
Yeah.
make?
I think it's hinging on the term, Frank, of flexibility. And I think flexibility doesn't mean remote working all the time.
No,
And if you
correct.
look at our employee barometer, so JLL does research not just on the big corporate occupier, but we actually speak to employees. And what I found fascinating in our most recent employee barometer was that over 75% of what we would classify as Gen Z had a strong desire to be in an office environment. And I think that means that going back to the Randstad stats, yes, they desire flexibility, but being a remote worker 100% of the time, our research is saying that they don't want that.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Human beings are gregarious by nature.
Yeah.
We 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 all lived together in the same cave back in the old days, right? We
Yeah.
liked that, and we still like that. We still like each other.
Yeah.
You and I don't know each other, but I'll tell you, I've enjoyed meeting you and interfacing with you and the conversations we've had in the past.
Mhm.
So we like that. Uh,
Yeah.
Gen Z is the most remote native digital population that we have,
Agree.
where an older generation might take a break to go digital. Gen
Hmm.
Z takes a break to go in person.
Yeah. It's a really
That
good
that is
summary.
a
Yeah.
big change in
Yeah.
the way things are happening or have sorted themselves out. So I agree. But
Yeah.
how do you manage that? Because
Yeah.
you said flexibility. Gen Z says, "Yeah, I kinda like, sort of wanna maybe be there, 3 days a week,
Yeah.
different days each week."
Yeah.
Not always the same, not
Yeah.
always for the same purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you manage the facility side and do the strategic work for a real estate portfolio for a large company or a small company, just a 50-person company,
Yeah.
um, so that they have real estate efficiency? Because even when everybody was supposedly in the office,
Hmm.
we did a study, and we did it with, one of the major tech companies, uh, Big 5 or Big 10, um, and we all calculated that their at-desk utilization was 42%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do the economics of that work for somebody strategically, or how do you master that?
Yeah. What I love about it is this is where, when people challenge me and say, where is AI and is it going to disrupt real estate? What I love
Well,
about it,
it's right
Frank,
on the just to my left, by the way.
it's, yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. But it's allowing us to be quite scientific on, to your point, utilization of space. And if I reflect on conversations that I have with CEOs of organizations, whether they be big multinational or, to your point, the 50-person company, they want to know how they're spending their capital wisely, right? They want to
Mhm.
know that every dollar they're spending has a return. And to your point around utilization levels, how do they get that right? And I am gonna date myself a little bit now, Frank, and go back to workplace strategy, which I was doing even 20 years ago, where
Yep,
we had a
yep,
concept called activity-based working, and we were designing
right.
spaces to accommodate those different activities. And even back then, utilization rates were in the 50 to 60%, and especially it depended on what day you were looking at. I think now with this concept of personalization, we're actually enabling companies to be more scientific on the type of space they need and when. And I'm going to give you an example. I was chatting to a tech firm the other day, and I said, what are your utilization rates at? And this was in Europe. It was in Dublin and London, were the two cities we were talking about, Frank. And they said, our utilization rates are up to 70%. I went, wow. But he said, but only Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I said, okay.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
then he said, which I thought was a really clever, they said, we open our doors to visitors on Mondays and Fridays. And he said, some of those visitors might be clients we're interacting with, or we promote a lot of our kind of brand associated events on those days. And he said, the reason we've done that is not to hit utilization levels or to even use the space, it's to give the feeling of people connection, to give the feeling that if you do come in on a Friday, actually it's busy. Going back to our comment around why do people come into the office? One of the reasons is human connection. It is to step away. And actually, some of our data is now saying that Gen Zers come to the office for digital detox so that they can get away
Well,
from
that's what I'm
the
saying.
tech.
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree. I
And
agree with that.
and having these environments that have multi-purpose, nothing ignites the CEO conversation. If I say each dollar you spend is actually serving three or four purposes, and as long as we can articulate what the purpose is and the profile of the individuals that it is impacting, then they're okay spending those dollars. And again, a lot of our research has very real time data that can show to them that spaces are being used for multi purposes, that spaces are being used to align to their business strategy, not just to an individual talent strategy. And that's where they get excited about spending the dollars on real estate.
We had, and this is dated, 15 years or so. Um, a similar conversation with, again, a very large tech company, and their utilization was not quite where you're saying because
Mm,
that was then and this is now.
yeah,
But one of the problems they had with the concept of bringing outside companies with, because that was one of our recommendations, is you
yeah,
segregate the space and you turn a section of your space into what we'll call flexible workspace, and
yeah.
you interact, literally can turn it into a profit center. You interact with your suppliers, with uh,
Mhm,
your clients, engineers from other firms, et cetera, in this one zone.
mhm,
Utilization, or as you're talking about, use-based workspace.
yeah,
Um, and they went, "Ooh, we got security issues."
yeah.
Okay, first they were a primary government contractor with
Yeah.
both standard and Department of Defense contracts.
Mm,
So
mhm,
we can't have people just walking in here, and the distance from that space to the lunch counter goes right through. So they didn't plan for that.
mhm.
Therefore, they couldn't take advantage of it back then.
Yeah,
Our company's planning for this use,
yeah.
because if you're at 60% utilization, that means you're at 40% non-utilization.
Mhm,
That means you're paying for the space for that 40%. That means you're negotiating harder with the property company, et cetera, saying, "Hey, I
yeah,
can't justify the total cost of allocable overhead for these work state." How does that all work out? Because
yeah.
for me, it says reduction in the value of the plant of the facility.
Mhm.
That puts stress on the property company and even more stress on the asset management and financial institution that's financed behind them, which is a cascading event financially.
Mhm. Mhm. I think there's no one size fits all, Frank. I think for big organizations that going back to your question of how do they use that space, really what you were alluding to is how do they configure it, right? So what we do know as well is that every workspace is still a combination of spaces. We talk a lot in the industry around collaboration space. Well, collaboration space can mean it's for your employees. It can also be for your external, whether it be clients. This organization that I was referring to is a big tech company, but they also offer big training, and therefore being able to relate to the companies of which they are engaging with and training. Their collaboration spaces are multifunctional in that they can
Their new
be,
space.
yeah.
This is a new space design. I pretty much get it, but retro,
Oh
or if
no,
you
yeah,
built
yeah,
your own campus
yeah,
15 or 20 years ago,
yeah.
you've got a lot of reorganization and redesign to do.
Yeah, completely. Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but some of this space was space they've had for quite a long time, and they have spent money on
Okay.
reconfiguring it, to your point, or ensuring again that the dollars they were spending had multiple purposes to that dollar. It wasn't just meeting rooms and internal collaboration space. They thought around that kind of outward facing. And it goes back, Frank, you and I again have been in this industry for a while. We've worked with tech companies that used to have product display areas, right, where they would have their
Yes, yes,
hardware that,
yes, yes.
they would have their next phone or their next laptop, where they wanted clients to come in and have a playful journey with whatever product they were selling. So I think it's not a new concept, but to your point, with a knowledge economy, how they are doing it is a little bit different. But I'd also say at the other end of the spectrum, you're right, highly regulated financial services organizations, they want to be able to bring visitors in, but at the same time, they're going to have restricted areas, and their security and access is going to be one of the barriers of entry into that space. So this is where I go. It doesn't have a one size fits all. For smaller organizations and for more remote locations, a lot of even the big corporates are saying actually flex is part of that journey.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to you're creating an ecosystem for whatever organization that you are designing for. And that's why I'm really happy, because that requires strategy. It requires data, it requires strategy, return on investment of every dollar that you're spending. We are not seeing that the value of real estate in highly amenitized, high quality assets in key urban locations. We're actually seeing a premium bidding put on those assets. I do agree with you, more remote locations that aren't in big urban centers, that are grade B, that need, retrofitting in a challenging market.
Yeah.
That's where we're seeing dampening valuations. So I'd say right now, we have been saying this for quite a while. We are looking into a bifurcated market where the top assets in key locations actually are getting a premium. Other assets are now having to look into and justify capital deployment into those if they're in the right locations. And dare I say it, I'm going to date myself again, Frank. Location, location, location is back
No,
on the,
no,
as
no,
everybody
no, no,
ways,
no,
back
no,
on the
no.
agenda.
I disagree with you entirely. It's
Okay.
timing, timing, timing.
Fine.
Not,
Perfect.
not
Timing and
location, location,
location. Can we
location.
agree on that?
Timing, timing, timing. No, I really think that what you just described, let's see, I saw that in 84, I saw that in 93, I saw that in 2002. Right now, you're in London.
Yep.
Okay. Tell me, how many cranes are out there? Not a lot, just a few.
It
Just a
depends
few.
on where you are in
Okay,
the
a
city.
few.
Yeah.
A few. How much office space had been converted to residential in the last 10 years? A lot, particularly in the primary locations
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
reduced that, and new space wasn't built. So I would say the big percentage of the pressure you're feeling is the change in the space utilization without the equal acceleration to develop new space correspondingly. That we see that issue going on in major markets. That has started in Manhattan now. Also, it takes a lot longer to build new buildings to replace the loss through residential conversion than it does to do the residential conversion.
Yeah, I would also say there are new assets certainly in Manhattan that are going up, and there's a lot more of the organizations that are in Manhattan that are investing in their office space, Frank. And
Yeah,
when we talk
internally, I agree.
yeah, and when we talk about yes, there was definitely, and here in London there was a conversion to resi for some of those assets that were never going to realize the value of office. That goes back to the economics we talked about before that were just being realized, right? Underutilized assets that had an ability to be converted were converted. That hasn't changed based upon the last few years. Again, what we are seeing though is that organizations, as they get the science right and they understand the return on the investment, we are seeing more and more dollars go into creating highly amenitized spaces that are used effectively. So the office environments and the return to office and the demand for offices in key city centers, we're continuing to see an increase in that space.
When you say highly amenitized, and I agree with you that is a
Hmm.
material change in the way office space is developed today.
Yeah.
The ping pong table of yore um, for the in the tech world. Oh, we're cool. We got a lounge. We're the bro society. That's all dead. That's all gone. Uh,
Yeah.
what amenities are key for people developing space today for their own use, or maybe for in the shared workspace environment, co-working business centers, etc.?
Mhm.
What amenities are key to maintaining the longevity of the customer requirement that you see?
Hmm. I think a lot of it is, dare I say it, associated with food, with environments that feel like people can relax and do something in a different way. We still are seeing in some of the key assets in core markets that having things like a gym facility, having different things that individuals can go and personalize their day with those amenities is really critical. I'm going to go back to food though. Like, never underestimate the value of good coffee. That's one of the things
Well,
that I've talked
I
about
agree with
for a
that,
long
but
time.
never overestimate the value of a beer tap.
Yeah.
We've seen people go that route as well, and
Yeah.
that proved to be a bridge too far.
Yeah, I
Um,
couldn't agree with you more. But it is, you think about going back to the start of this conversation, Frank, around humans want to be human. They want to associate with other people. They want to learn from other people. They want to interact with other people. And one of the things that draws humans together is food and a good food offering and little things like standing, waiting in, I'm going to say queue, waiting in a line to get some food and chatting to the people beside you. We actually are doing micro surveys and people enjoy that within a limit. They don't want to wait more than a certain amount of time, but they enjoy that interaction because sometimes it's with somebody they've never met before.
yeah,
Then you
no,
go and you have a coffee and you have a bit to eat, and the connection of food is extremely powerful. So, a lot of the amenitization that we see is oriented around where are they creating those connections. One of them, which is very good food offering.
yeah, no, I agree with that. And even if a company, we're looking at relocating one of our own offices from it's in a major market, from one major building to another one. And our discussion about physical space is overshadowed by our discussion about, is there a gym nearby? How's the parking? How's the security? What's the ability of restaurants? And there's only about 100-person office, so it's not going to have a big food structure
Yeah,
within it. But access to those amenities within
yeah,
a 1 or 2 minute walk or 3 minute walk is critically important
mhm,
overall. And so I recognize that
yeah,
importance. Let's
yeah.
change bandwidth a little bit here. Neuroinclusive diversity
Hmm.
in space design.
Hmm.
Big words. A lot of people use them. I don't think everybody understands them or is really focused on the important strategically, not just in the short term, but in the mid and long term of those concepts that are being
Hmm.
utilized at the highest levels today. Can you
Yeah.
define and give us some thoughts around that? Because this is something that you didn't discuss 10 years ago.
No, it's true. So maybe I could start just with defining a little bit of what
Please.
neurodiversity is. And, I think I speak to a lot of heads of real estate, and being able to accommodate physical abilities is something that we have gotten quite good at in the real
Yeah.
estate industry. Accessibility,
Not good
whatever.
enough, not good
Not good
enough,
enough, I
but
agree,
but
but it's something that we've
hugely
accommodated
advanced.
to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Neurodiversity is just the way that people's brains work, and that brain functioning can be different, and it can be triggered by a lot of environment. So when I say that, Frank, you think about autism, ADHD. I have a highly dyslexic daughter,
Mhm.
and I've learned a lot about neurodiversity. I've learned around what environments help her, which environments actually make her less productive, and the frustration that she has with those environments. So when we talk about neurodiverse design, things like lighting, I know that if I sit in a room that has neon strip lighting in it or the equivalent of it, If I'm in that room all day, by the end of the day, I have a headache. So
Yes.
that is not improving my productivity. I have some colleagues that I work with that really bright colors actually are quite disturbing and off putting. And they've walked into some environments where they have been neurally disturbed by that. So, thinking about all of that optimization of, we go back to this concept of almost hyper personalization, which is the utopia, but where we can be designing spaces that consider those needs, which may not be obvious, is exactly where a neurodiverse design starts to really take those into consideration. I'm going to go back to kind of activity based working, things like having concentration space. I think now that we've got more people coming back into the office, we are moving away from the assumption that concentrated work is only done at home or in a remote location. You need that in an office environment now, where a person's day will be intermingled with the type of work that they're doing. Those things now need to be taken into further consideration, not only for neurodiverse candidates, but just for the type of work people are doing in offices again. So, designing the space to be able to accommodate that and be thoughtful of it, the organizations that are doing that have a much higher feedback on their satisfaction scores of that type of space.
How do you blend the space, or is it even difficult? I don't know. I've not designed space to this need effectively. When we built buildings and designed space specifically for our own customer base, we had a couple of theories. One theory was never design anything they're going to say, "Oh, I remember when that was cool."
Yeah.
So really focused not away from fads
Mhm.
overall, and then we would also think in new. We always thought in ultra high quality materials, but
Mhm.
everything being very neutral, and your energy, your color came from your technology and your artwork.
Mhm.
But everything else was pretty vanilla
Mhm.
overall, and that seemed to work for us.
Yeah.
It was a comfortable
Mhm.
environment. Um, I'm like some of the people you described. I'm very sensitive to the environment that I'm working in. It's why I've worked from home for almost 40 years.
Mhm.
Uh, I like
Mhm.
working in my personal environment and then going
Mhm.
out for my gregarious energy with others. Um,
Mhm.
I was just in a facility yesterday. I was out of town. I live in Fort Worth, as you know, and I was up in Ohio at a meeting yesterday, and it was a shared work environment.
Mhm.
The two or three pods, which were privacy
Yeah.
pods for a couple of people for phone calls and that quiet work.
Mhm.
They were very nice, by the way. They were very large. I went, "Ugh." And I walked to the restroom. And in the hallway to the restroom, there was a guy on the phone.
Yeah.
And I thought, this guy had to go to a hallway to the restroom to find privacy for a call. And I thought, this
Yeah.
is not good. This is not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So little things like that are so
Mhm.
important because
I
um,
agree.
comfort, just comfort,
Yeah.
is critical. And it comes down to, we used to talk in design about ergonomics.
Yeah.
Ergon- we're well past that. We used to talk about access.
Yeah.
We're not fully past that, but we're working on that constantly, just like we work
Yeah.
on ergonomics. But neurodiversity in design and total environment, which I think plays into the amenity issue. It's very, very important today.
Yeah.
How does a small company that has 10 employees um,
Mhm.
that moves into spec space that a developer builds,
Mhm.
a small company, a startup, deal with these things effectively? They don't really have the same level of control that a Fortune 500 or tech company would, that says, well, we'll solve this. We'll build a 3 million foot campus just for ourselves.
Yeah.
It'll be amazing. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
how does a small company, because most companies are small.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, you know this better than I do. This is where flex comes into for the very small companies. And I think some of the flex organizations have done a brilliant job of amenitizing space and making it open space for
I
those
agree with that. I
with
agree with
that
that.
with those small user groups. I also find in, again, I'm going back to probably relating to here in London, Frank, but we are seeing this in other key city centers. What we're seeing is what I would call the development of vertical campuses, which are multi-tenanted buildings. And a lot of the organizations that are taking space in there are taking them because of the amenities that are available in the wider open spaces. So I'll give you an example. We've got an asset here in London. It's a address of it is 22 Bishopsgate, and it became quite famous because it had highly amenitized. It has an art gallery within it.
Mhm.
It has a climbing wall in it. It has a gym. It has a spa. Has one of the most phenomenal food offerings. It has a high-end restaurant up at the top of it.
Cockle in.
Yes, there you go.
There you go.
and, and
One of my favorites. One of my
there
favorites.
you go.
In fact,
Perfect.
it's funny because it's one of my favorites. I'm in the flex work industry, as you know, and it's also one of the favorites of the biggest guy in the flex industry, and we meet there all the time.
Perfect. There we go. So there you go. And you think about it, a company that whether it be a 10 person or a 20 person, we actually did work with a organization that was a big company, but they wanted a small amount of space in a building that could be very client facing and that they could have all these amenities. So I go back to that asset is getting premium rents because for two reasons.
Excuse me for interrupting, but that asset is 30 years old now.
Yeah, it's been
That's
upgraded.
not a
It's
new
been
design
upgraded. Well,
concept.
yeah.
That's not a new design
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
It's a concept, though, that has been very well refined,
Yes.
and it's in a somewhat rarefied marketplace. You know, it's on the edge of the city, right on top of a tube station, or there's 2 tube stations on either side.
Yeah.
It's got, to your point, location, location, location. It
It
was
is.
the perfect
Yeah.
location for a
Yeah.
highly amenitized building, which when it was built, there were none in the area.
No, and now they are everywhere, right?
Yeah,
I'm in the West End of London. I'm central London. You have it. Canary Wharf has it. Canary Wharf
yeah,
has done some tremendous things. And then I translate that footprint to Manhattan, where you've got Midtown, you've got Hudson Yard,
yeah,
you've got these areas within cities now
yeah.
where you get whether you be a small company or a big company, you're drawn to it because when we talk about highly amenitized space, it doesn't mean that you have to provide that yourself. Being
No,
an
I agree.
environment,
I
if
think you're almost better if you don't, because you get more
yeah,
variety and less institutionalization.
agree.
It's funny, you mentioned building inside of cities and neighborhoods and such. We worked with a very, very large, Chinese development company,
Hmm.
that was, developing in China, and their little motto, if you will, was, "We build cities within cities." They did. Their projects were massive,
Yeah.
massive, giant mixed-use projects built inside of city cores. They have the density to do so,
Hmm.
and I see that. I also there's a company over in the continent that, all they do is go into the buildings that you said are the difficult ones, the B and lower A class buildings in the where the high rises slope down a little bit and out near
Hmm.
the low rise buildings. They go into those buildings. All they do is sit down with the owner and build out amenity packages inside of those buildings. And they've
Yep.
seen about a 15% uplift in the combination, in the value combination of occupancy and rate on
Yep.
those buildings. And
Exactly.
they make
Perfect example.
they were in the serviced office business. They were in that
Yeah.
business. Uh, but they translated their model after selling that company. They translated their model to this specialized amenity model. They're doing
Yep.
quite well, and
Yep.
the properties that they impact are doing quite well. So I think this is a trending thing that we will see on the retrofit side is service providers as opposed to the property companies themselves.
I couldn't agree more. It goes all the way back to the start of the podcast of what do we build these spaces for? We build them for an experience. Now, the experience a company expects is one experience, and then an experience that the employee expects. And ensuring that you get that, it isn't just about gone are the days that a property is a utility. It's just something that you deliver for people, right? It is it, and this is what I love around. I'm at the C-suite table, whether it be a big organization or a small organization, because the conversation is strategic now. It is, how do I give this experience but create the outcome that I want as an organization? And I do think, you're right. That's a fantastic business model, bringing that service mindset, bringing environments where, again, you can confidently say, we're impacting the employee's performance, whether it be their well being or whether it be their satisfaction or whether it be their output. We're at the point in our industry now where we can say we're doing that. It's the
Yeah.
holy trilogy you and I were trying to solve probably 30 years ago, Frank,
Yeah.
impacting human productivity. Do you remember that?
That is true. That is true. I want to explore AI for a second. Overall,
Mhm.
the impact on AI on employee structure and your comment about strategic. We believe that Flex became strategic about 2014 or 15,
Mhm.
and we believe that Flex became strategic at that point based on large companies, not just tech companies, but large companies, um, focus on winning the war for talent as opposed to just the way they build their space.
Mhm.
And Flex became remote, hybrid, et cetera, was well before the pandemic. The pandemic just kicked everybody across the threshold, said, oh, we got to do it. We got to do it now.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, because otherwise everybody's going to quit.
Yeah.
Okay, and commute became the issue. Everybody likes being in the office.
Mhm.
Sometimes
Mhm.
nobody likes getting an hour and a half on the train to get to the office.
Mhm. Mhm. I
So
agree.
the ability to cut out the commute 1 or 2 days a week became more important than working away from the office. It was really
Mhm.
that became, or at least in our view.
Mhm.
So strategic is the key word now. Winning the war for talent is
Mhm.
elemental to running a successful business.
Mhm.
But winning the war for talent, I'm like an old sailor, or some people say an old pirate, and AI is like, a parrot on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Arr.
Yeah.
A little bit of that attitude. Um, we ourselves went through a decision last year to a little almost a year and a half ago now to have a hiring freeze. We
Mhm.
said we still want to grow, we still want to do this, but we're going to have a hiring freeze. We're going to force ourselves to embrace new technologies and this and that. And we've grown
Mhm.
30% since that time, and we've hired 2 people.
Yep.
Okay, we broke our rule. We hired 2 people. What we did was we trained a lot of people,
Yep.
and we basically say that every single individual in every position in our company has to have a customized AI executive assistant that
Mhm.
works for their specific role
Mhm.
in order to be economically productive in tomorrow's world. Not today's world yet, but in tomorrow's world. So we said, well,
Mhm.
let's do this early. We can do this overall. That decision, we didn't fire anybody. We changed some positions around, but to not hire anybody, huge impact on office space overall.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're just moving right now, and it completely changed our view of what we needed over the next 5 years.
Mhm. Yeah.
Are you seeing the same thing in companies?
Yeah, I definitely, and I think you've definitely taken that step. A lot of organizations have, and some organizations are even thinking, we are doing work processes now with people that will be done by AI. So going back to your comment, you didn't get rid of anybody, but therefore your future demand of growth didn't necessarily have the same demand profile for offices. What I would say, though, Frank, going back to what our discussion has been here, the purpose of the office is crystallizing further, because as we have AI disruption and we have organizations wondering what work processes will be done by AI, the human connection, the need for human connection, the war for talent, office is very much so at the heart of that. Where again, they're saying we need spaces that associate with our brand that do bring the talent in. Yes, we might in the back end be looking at what work processes are going to be disrupted by AI and what functions are going to be impacted by it. But actually, weirdly, the demand in terms of total overall space, yes, it's a shifting profile, but the need for the office is actually crystallizing further because of the need for human connection.
Well, I agree with that. I think our growth profile of employment, our employment growth profile, though, is going to materially change, hugely change, not just at the office level, but across all work, the entire global workforce
Yeah.
overall. And
Yeah.
I now have my imaginary friend that sits in my office with me. And candidly, what I love about that is I don't have to have two assistants that I ask to do things for me.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I need some research on this, or I need some this and that. I don't have to lose anything in the um, discussion because, oh, I didn't really understand what you meant. I don't have
Mm.
to do any of that anymore. I can just
Yeah.
do it. Uh,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
know it's changing the profile of what people will do and how you'll hire, who you'll hire, and how you'll
Yeah.
train. Training.
Yeah.
Opening positions to people inside of your company that um, can learn and embrace technologies rather than trying to get rid of a group of people is critical, and
Yeah.
it's hugely critical to the spirit of your company. You talk about living your brand. If you're a service company, your
Yeah.
first obligation is to ensure the security of your own team.
Yeah. I
Well,
couldn't
you
agree
do
more.
that by servicing your customer well, but your
Yeah.
first obligation, if you hire somebody, man, you're responsible for their family.
Yeah.
Are.
It's very
So
true.
you'd
Yeah.
better be thinking about that overall.
Yeah.
Um, New talent, we've talked about amenitization, a little bit about AI. What's your add something to the AI conversation where you think how you think it's gonna impact occupancy or amenity structures or the way space will be used in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to see where it'll all play out, to your point, exactly around how is it going to disrupt the way that companies work. I think that still has to play out, right? There's still a lot of theories around that it's going to make people more productive and therefore they're going to be able to do other things, just like we've seen other periods of history where a major impact, a major shockwave of a technological change. So I think how it plays out is still, I'm not able to predict it. I don't think anyone is right now, Frank. But to your point around going back to how space is being used, I'm excited around how AI can give us real time data that we used to just guess at things, right? We used to guess at how you design
Yep.
spaces. AI is going to help us do that in a more scientific way. I go back to ensuring that when a company spends a dollar, that they're getting a return on that dollar. Our ability to reflect that becomes a lot more accurate by using and implementing AI. We talked about design and design features and going with your gut feel. Actually, AI and where we're using AI for design right now, you can instantly see and feel an environment without having to spend a lot of dollars building it before you go and spend those dollars. So for me, looking at how AI is enabling our organization to advise companies, but also seeing how organizations are really embracing it. I go back to they want human connection, so they are willing to spend dollars on their real estate, but ensuring that they're spending it in the right way. That's where I'm seeing AI be really brought into that conversation as a tool, as an enhancer, rather than something that is a threat to we don't need office space anymore. So for us, we have worked very hard over the last few years. As you know, AI is a wonderful tool, but you need the data and you need the right data for it to be drawing from, for you to give insightful insight, and for AI to train to be able to improve what we're doing. You talked about research. We all know as well that AI can scrape from research in an open source versus proprietary data. And we've really, really worked hard as an organization to compartmentalize that proprietary data. So the advice that we are giving to our clients is accurate, and
Yeah.
we're now trading on that accuracy.
I think the capacity today, I know when I built my first building, we had big name architect doing the thing. He sketched all the modeling up with a pencil. Okay, it was brilliant. Today, the modeling that you've got on utilization and the speed with which it can be done is amazing,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Um, Strategically, the thinking that goes into strategies as opposed to build it and they will come
Yeah.
theories are huge leaps forward as well, I think, in the world overall. I just want to thank you very, very much for sharing
Thank,
your strategic thoughts, for sharing your knowledge, everything that you do at JLL. I'm obviously a fan, and
thank you.
um, I just want to thank you for your contribution today.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for having me and for a very enlightening and enriching conversation. So thank you.
Take care.
If it's impacting the future of work, it's in the Future of Work podcast by allwork.space.